been logging the Carpathian forests for 22 years. I know these mountains the way a man knows his own hands. Every ridge, every creek bed, every stand of old growth. Spruce that hasn't been touched since the war. Last autumn, the forest started moving. My crew was working a section near the Ukrainian border. 12 men. We'd been there 3 weeks, cutting spruce for a timber company out of Cluj. Standard operation. Mark the trees, fell them, limb, bark, whole. The old men in the village warned us before we went up. They always do. They said the forest there belongs to the Leshy, the master of the woods. They said we should leave an offering at the tree line. Bread and salt, a copper coin. We laughed. We're modern men. We have GPS and satellite phones and diesel, powered feller bunchers. We don't leave bread for fairy tales. The first sign was the stream. Every morning I walked the same path from camp to the cutting site, 40 minutes northeast, following a stream that ran downhill toward the valley. I'd walked it 20 times. On the 21st morning, the stream was gone. Not dried up, not frozen. Gone. The stream was there, but it was dry. The stones were dusty. No moss, no watermarks, as if no water had ever flowed there. I checked my GPS, same coordinates, same path. But the stream I'd followed for 3 weeks simply wasn't there anymore. I found a new stream 200 meters east. Same width, same depth, same stones. But running in the opposite direction. Uphill. Water doesn't run uphill. I know that. Physics doesn't allow it. But there it was, flowing steady, climbing the slope as if gravity had changed its mind. That afternoon, one of my men, Pavel, came back to camp early. He was pale, wouldn't look at anyone. He said the trail he'd been using to haul timber had changed. The trees he'd marked yesterday with orange paint were in different positions. Not moved, different trees entirely. Different species. Where there had been spruce, now there were birch. I went to check. He was right. The orange marks were gone. The spruce stand we'd been cutting for 3 days was now a birch grove. Old birch, thick trunk, trees that had clearly been growing there for decades. Our cut logs were gone too. 40 cubic meters of spruce vanished that night. I couldn't sleep. I lay in my tent and listened to the forest. And I heard something I'd never heard in 22 years of logging. Laughter, low and deep, coming from everywhere and nowhere. Like the trees themselves were breathing it out. The next morning, I told the crew we were packing up. Moving the camp to the lower valley, a rational decision. The timber was gone, the terrain was unreliable. We packed the trucks, started down the mountain road. The same road we'd driven up 3 weeks ago. After 2 hours of driving, we arrived back at the camp we'd just left. Same tents, same fire pit, same tire tracks in the mud. We'd driven downhill for 2 hours and arrived at the place we'd departed from. The GPS showed us moving. The compass pointed north. The odometer counted kilometers. But the forest kept folding us back. That is when I remembered the old man's words. The offering, bread and salt. I'm not a superstitious man, but I'm a practical one. And when the practical options run out, you try what is left. I took a loaf of bread from the supply truck, a bag of salt, a copper coin from my pocket. I walked to the tree line and I set them down on a flat stone. I said, out loud in Romanian, "We're sorry. We took too much. We'll leave." The wind stopped completely. Not a single leaf moved. The birds went silent. The whole forest held its breath. Then I saw him, standing between 2 oaks, maybe 30 meters away. Tall, impossibly tall. His skin was the color of bark. His hair was moss and lichen. His eyes were green, but not like human eyes. Like light through leaves. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just looked at me the way you look at an insect that is wandered into your kitchen, not angry, not threatening, simply deciding whether I belonged there. I blinked. He was gone. The wind returned. The birds started singing again. The bread and salt were gone from the stone. The copper coin remained. We drove down the mountain. This time the road led where it should. We reached the village in 40 minutes. The old man was sitting on his porch. He looked at me and he smiled. He said, quote, "He let you go. That means you asked nicely. Most men don't ask at all. I don't log that section of the Carpathians anymore. I don't go back. And when people ask why, I tell them the timber isn't good enough. They believe me. It is easier than the truth." I didn't go to Aokigahara to die. I went because I study acoustics. I'm a graduate student at Tokyo University. My thesis is on sound propagation in dense forests. Aokigahara is one of the most acoustically interesting forests in Japan. The volcanic rock absorbs sound differently than soil. The trees grow so close together that sound waves bend and scatter in ways that shouldn't be possible. That is what I told myself. It was research. Nothing more. I entered the forest from the North Trail, near the ice cave. Standard entry point. I had my equipment, 2 parabolic microphones, a portable recorder, a GPS unit, and enough supplies for 2 days of field work. The first thing you notice about Aokigahara is the silence. Not the absence of sound, a thick silence. The kind that presses against your ears like water pressure at the bottom of a pool. The trees are Japanese cypress and cedar, growing from hardened lava. The ground is uneven, covered in moss that swallows your footsteps. You can walk for hours and hear nothing but your own breathing. I set up my first recording station about 1 kilometer from the trail. I mounted the microphones on tripods, calibrated the recorder, and began my standard test. I shouted a single word, in Japanese, the word for echo, Kodama. The echo came back, but it wasn't my voice. I thought I was mistaken. Sound distortion in dense forest can alter frequency and timbre. The volcanic rock creates unusual reflections. I told myself it was an acoustic artifact. I tried again. This time I shouted my name. Keiko, the echo came back. It said something else. 2 syllables, not my name. Something that sounded like a word, but a word I didn't know. I checked the recording, played it back through my headphones. The first echo after I'd shouted Kodama was a phrase, 3 words, maybe 4, spoken in a language I couldn't identify. Not Japanese, not any language I'd heard, but it sounded familiar, like a word you know but can't quite remember. On the tip of your tongue, I moved deeper into the forest, set up a second station, shouted again. This time the echo was longer, a full sentence. Maybe 2, the voice was female, low and soft, and it was answering me, not repeating, answering. I shouted, "Who are you?" The echo came back fast, faster than an echo should. As if the forest had been waiting for the question, I played it back, 3 words, clear. And this time I almost understood them. Almost. Like hearing a conversation through a wall and catching every other word. I should have stopped. Any rational researcher would have stopped, but the acoustics were impossible. Echoes don't respond to questions. Sound waves don't form words, and I needed to understand what was happening. I walked for another hour. The forest grew denser. The trees pressed closer. The moss on the ground was so thick, I couldn't see the lava rock beneath it. I stopped shouting words. I started making simple sounds. A clap, a whistle, a single sustained note. Every sound came back as language. Every clap became a syllable. Every whistle became a vowel. The forest was translating my noise into speech. I found a clearing. In the center stood a tree unlike any other. Massive, ancient. Its trunk was wider than 3 people standing shoulder to shoulder. Its bark was white, almost silver, and covered in markings. Not carvings, not natural pattern. The markings looked like writing. Characters I didn't recognize, spiraling up the trunk in a helix pattern, disappearing into the branches above. I set up my microphones around the tree. I stood with my back against the trunk, and I said, slowly and clearly, I am Kiko. I am listening. The echo that came back was not an echo, it was a voice. Right beside my ear, a woman's voice speaking directly to me. And this time I understood every word. She said, "We have been calling you for a very long time. The trees remember your voice from before you were born." I turned around. No one was there. The clearing was empty. Just the tree and the moss and the silence. But the markings on the trunk had changed. New characters had appeared, and I could read them now. They said, "Stay." I packed my equipment. I walked back to the trail. It took me 4 hours to find it, though I'd walked in for one. When I reviewed my recordings that night, every file was the same. 2 hours of silence, then, at the very end, a single word in Japanese. Karu, to return. I haven't gone back to Aokigahara, but something. When I'm alone in a quiet room, I hear it. An echo that doesn't belong to any sound I've made, and I'm afraid that one day I'll understand it perfectly. I hunt alone, always have. My grandfather hunted alone. His father before him, in the forests of northern Sweden, above the Arctic Circle. You learn to be self-sufficient, or you don't survive. What my grandfather never told me was that the forest has things in it that don't want to be hunted. It was November, the dark season. In Kiruna, the sun doesn't rise for weeks. You get a few hours of blue twilight at midday, then the black comes back and stays. I was tracking elk in the old forest, about 40 kilometers from the nearest road. Deep country, the kind of forest where the trees are so old they've forgotten what an axe sounds like. I'd been out 3 days. My pack was light. My rifle was clean. I was comfortable in the way only a man who has spent his life in the wilderness can be. On the third evening, I smelled smoke. Wood smoke, sweet. Birch wood. It came from a direction where I knew there were no cabins, no camps, no other hunters. I was alone in this section. I checked. I followed it, not because it was smart, because I was curious, and curiosity in the north is how men die. In a clearing between two ridges, I found a fire, small, well built, burning steady. Beside it sat a woman. She was the most beautiful woman I have ever seen. Long dark hair, pale skin, a dress that looked like it was woven from moss and birch bark, but draped like silk. She was barefoot despite the November cold. Her feet were white and clean against the frozen ground. She looked up at me and smiled. Her eyes were dark, not brown, dark, like looking into a well with no bottom. She spoke in Swedish, but with an accent I couldn't place. Old musical, she said. Quote, "You've walked a long way. Sit, warm yourself." I sat. I'm not ashamed to admit that I sat. A man alone in the dark forest, tired and cold, finds a fire and a beautiful woman. The body overrides the mind. She offered me food, dried meat, berries I didn't recognize. They tasted sweet and strange, like nothing I'd eaten before. We talked. She asked about my family, my grandfather, the places I hunted. She knew the forest better than I did. She described clearings and streams I'd never seen, paths that led to places she said had no names. She said, quote, "The forest is deeper than you think. There are places in it that have never seen a man. I could show you." Something in her voice made me look at her more carefully. The firelight was playing on her face, and everything about her was perfect, too perfect, like a painting. And then she turned to add wood to the fire, and I saw her back. It was hollow, from the shoulders to the waist. Her back was not a back at all. It was an opening, like a tree that has been hollowed out by rot. Inside, I could see darkness. the kind that has depth and weight and presence. And inside that darkness, something moved, something small and pale, like a grub in dead wood. My grandfather's voice came back to me, a warning he'd given me when I was 7 years old. Sitting on his knee, he'd said, "If you ever meet a beautiful woman in the forest, and something feels wrong, do not let her see that you know, do not run. Back away slowly, and never ever follow her, the Huldra." That is what he called her, the forest spirit who wears a woman's skin. She lures men deeper into the woods. They follow her because she is beautiful, and they never come back. I was sitting 3 meters from a Huldra, and she knew I'd seen her back. She turned back to face me. Her smile hadn't changed, but her eyes had. They were brighter now, hungry. She said, quote, "Will you come with me? I know a place where the elk gather, more than you've ever seen." I did what my grandfather taught me. I didn't say no. I didn't say yes. I picked up my rifle, stood slowly, and said, quote, "I need to check my traps first. I'll come back." The old rule, never refuse a Huldra directly. It angers them. Promise to return, and she'll let you walk away. For now, she smiled wider. She said, quote, "I'll be waiting. I'm always here." I backed away, step by step, never turning my back on her. The firelight got smaller and smaller until it was just a point of orange in the black, and I was alone in the dark. I walked all night. I didn't stop. I didn't sleep. I followed my GPS to the road, and I waited for dawn. When the blue twilight came, I looked back at the forest. There was no clearing, no reach, just trees, endless and dark, stretching in every direction. I don't hunt that section in. I don't go above the Arctic Circle in November. But sometimes, in the deep winter, when the dark is absolute and the wind comes down from the north, I smell birch smoke, and I remember the taste of those berries, sweet and strange. And I wonder what would have happened if I'd followed her into the dark.